Of questions. Mr. Cooper, the floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. I'm going to be asking some questions relating to third parties and the use of foreign funds. First, to Professor Loewen, would you agree that it is problematic that registered third parties can use foreign funds to influence Canadians during an election?
Yes. I mean, I think it's certainly inconsistent with the spirit of the law in that we don't allow foreign donations directly to members of Parliament. So one would have to raise the question of why foreign funds could be used for third-party influence.
Thank you for that. Mr. Conacher, would you agree that this is problematic?
Yes, it is, and the bill does a lot to address that, except for leaving the loophole open, that still one individual is exempt from the rules and would be able to use their own money, which could easily be funneled to them from a foreign government, foreign entity or foreign individual, or a business, which only has a couple of shareholders, both being still allowed to spend $1.6 million to influence an election. It's just ridiculous and undemocratic.
Thank you for that. And as you do note, the legislation is an improvement from the status quo insofar as the Chief Electoral Officer identified at least two existing loopholes in the law for third parties to use foreign funds. The first loophole is the melding of funds, whereby monies donated to a third party can be treated as part of the general revenue of the third party. And a second loophole, as Mr. Conacher, you rightly noted, a third party can accept contributions from another entity that in turn collects contributions. And that can be used as a means to hide the actual source of funds. And this was what happened in the 2015 election when millions of dollars in U.S. money was funneled through a series of third parties that ended up in third parties such as Lead Now that used those foreign monies to influence Canadian voters. Now, as you note, Mr. Conacher, there is a loophole that is remaining in this bill, and that is that the requirement that third parties set up a separate bank account during the writ and the pre-writ and writ period and accept donations only from individuals would not apply to third parties if their contributions did not exceed 10% of their revenues. So, Professor Loewen, I was wondering if you have any thoughts on the reasonableness of that exemption or lack of reasonableness. What are your thoughts on it? Because it would seem to me to be a loophole that is problematic.
Yeah, I think generally the trajectory of this legislation in Canada has been increasingly tightening third-party participation in elections. That's been opposed by various people across the political spectrum over time, but we've arrived at that conclusion, and I don't see any benefit that's not outweighed by issues of transparency and foreign interference that would come from leaving that loophole open.
So it would be your recommendation to close the loophole entirely and simply require that all registered third parties engaged in elections to set up a separate bank account and accept donations only from individual donors similar to political parties. Is that your recommendation?
I don't want to comment on the mechanism because the ease of setting up a bank account, et cetera, et cetera. So whatever, it might be too difficult. So whatever you want to do in terms of the mechanism of it, that's up to parliamentarians. I don't have strong feelings on that, but I think the principle of limiting the capacity of third parties to accept and then reuse foreign funds is it's very reasonable to close that loophole.
And Mr. Conacher, do you wish to comment further on this loophole and how it should be closed?
Yes, I think you're not going to have a citizen group that has from product or sales or services anywhere near 90% of their revenue coming in. So I don't think it is in effect a loophole, the 10% threshold that you're talking about. But yes, it could be lowered to 0. Nothing wrong with that. But there is something else that I should point out, which is it's only takes into account the bill that did you receive more than 10% of your revenue from contributions during the previous calendar year or fiscal year. You can choose. So that means a third party could receive the money anytime past the previous 12 months and be able to use it. And so you only have to establish that for 1 year and have those contributions for that 1 year. And so it really doesn't close the loophole. It just still allows for the funneling as long as it happens 12 months before the election occurs.
Floor is for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I'll be directing my my questions at the start to Professor Loewen and Mr. Conacher. First of all, Mr. Loewen, it sounds to me like you've been upgraded to an Ivy League school. Is that a recent thing?
It is.
Well, congratulations on that. I guess I got to just a philosophical question to start us off with. So there's a couple of there's a couple of angles that that have been explored here. One is to have greater transparency by publishing lists. Mr. Conacher, you've been talking about making sure that names get published, but there's also been the discussion about putting controls or caps on investment. Which one do you think would be actually more effective, the transparency or the attempt to try and put a control on or
Thank
limit?
you for asking. Yeah, I'm not sure they're in trade-off, but thank you for asking. My thinking on this has evolved. I was of the mind that elections should be kind of a free arena where anyone can speak and transparency solves that. I've since come to the view that elections principally are a contest between political parties and political candidates, and that we should try to, in a sense, clear the space for them to be the agents and the organizations that are channeling citizens' interests and citizens' preferences and in elections. So increasingly, I'm of the mind that that elections should be fought between parties, and that the role of third parties, including labor unions, but also business associations, should be severely limited. And that's been, to be candid with you, influenced partially by looking at how cacophonous elections in the United States are as a result of the notion that anyone should be able to speak during elections.
Mr. Conacher? You have to unmute yourself, sir.
I would disagree. I think the system should be based on the number of voters that actually support the third party. And so one person should only be allowed to spend a very small amount, and a group with thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of members should be able to spend a multiple of that. Businesses are legally one person, and business executives are very few in number and don't represent shareholders politically or employees. And so businesses should be very strictly limited in what they can do. But citizen groups that are supported by tens of thousands of members, many are supported by many more voters than parties are, should be allowed to spend a multiple amount of what one voter could spend. And that would be an egalitarian system that fits with the Supreme Court of Canada's egalitarian model.
The next question I have is, from my perspective, and I've actually had legislation before this House, Bill C 406, back in 2018, 2019, that was voted down that would have basically forbade foreign money from coming in. But there's basically two channels. One of them is clandestine money coming from a foreign government, and the other is interest through third parties, large foundations that have charitable status. Some do, some don't, not-for-profits, and so on. That will share money between writs during the writ period. And of course, when you start mixing money in a bank account, we've already had that discussion here. But I'm just wondering, does the bill go far enough, in your opinions, Mr. Loewen and Mr. Conacher, to deal with the foreign governments aspect of it, the clandestine foreign government aspect? And do you differentiate that money from money that's coming from third-party organizations, charitable trusts? I can think of numerous ones. My colleague, Mr. Cooper, talked about Lead Now getting money. Do they both need to be treated differently? And does the proposed changes, do you think, do enough to make sure that it should be Canadian interests, and in my opinion, Canadian interests, Canadian money should be the only influence in a domestic federal election?
We've got a minute left here, witnesses, so please do your best to be gracious between splitting the time. Thank you.
I share your view, Mr. Calkins, that I think that we should limit spending in elections to citizens of the country, and then we can talk about what that mix is between parties and third parties. But whatever vehicles you create, if you don't have an outright ban on foreign money, it will find a way if it will find a way through, whether it's through charitable trust or through some other form, absent an outright ban.
I agree. It should be Canadian money participating in both policymaking processes and elections. And so don't forget that half of Canada's largest 1,000 companies are completely foreign owned. And so they should be very strictly limited in what they can do. And in terms of citizen groups, lots of citizen groups have programs. They should be able to receive money, international money for those programs. But when it comes to money to influence policymaking processes or elections, it should be coming from Canadians. And our proposal written submission will show how to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Calkins.